Today's presentation is Josef DellaGrotte gonna speak on unifying and dividing. And I just want to say up front, first, this is going to be recorded, but we are not going to record any of our breakout rooms. But the general presentation will be recorded in any of the comments that we make during that. This is not an MKP training. We simply are using Mankind Project Elder Society Zoom room and their Zoom lists, to reach out to people and invite them. This is just by invitation. So this is for our own edification, just our own conversation, enlightenment, whatever we can get out of it. And Josef is presented for us before. He's excellent, as those of you who know him know this. So I'm just going to pass it to him so we can utilize all the time that we have available to us. So take it away.
Okay, ready to go. So the subject, unifying, dividing, is like a Zen koan in many ways. But it comes from a real root. And that's why I want to set a background before we go into breakout rooms and go into the deeper dives. And I really appreciate all of you who organized the Elder Cafe, Tom, Bob, and Art, primarily. And it's just an opportunity to really explore themes. But the important thing for me is that we take something away that is not just a one-time theater presentation or a nice discussion. Because here's the background. The unifying and dividing is going on forever. It's part of the human condition. We, biologically speaking, we survived well and developed because we had the ability to cooperate. This has been talked about. Edmund Wilson, the people who've explored. Human beings have a tremendous capacity to cooperate, but we have at the same time a kind of yin-yang or a thesis-antithesis. We have a great capacity for megalomania, strong egotism, attachment to our beliefs, and this becomes destructive or dividing not only at the exterior level, but interior. Have you noticed? We have a hard time agreeing. And now in history, we have to wait for centuries often to see who really was a unifier more than a divider, because we have both of these elements obviously within ourselves. I could cite history, because I'm a psychohistorian, people like Marcus Aurelius, but he was a unifier as one of the enlightened Roman emperors, but he was a warrior. Obviously people would love to have killed him. Abraham Lincoln, on the whole, looks like a unifier, but people assassinated him, so they thought he was a divider. There's another great example. I throw these out from history only because this is the background, so to speak. He who forgets history is bound to relive it, experience its consequences all the time. I was just watching an incredible documentary on William the Conqueror, 1066. This guy was a Norseman from Norway, originally settled in Normandy. That's why they call it the Normans. And he didn't speak English. And he was given an opportunity to take over the throne of England, but it was contested. So he brought an entire army over at the Battle of Hastings, 1066. He killed Harold, the Anglo-Saxon, and that was the end of the Anglo-Saxon control of England. But you know what? That sounds like a divider, right? But in the end, it was William the Conqueror who made England what it is today. He set the new seeds for many things that are now you would recognize in England. So you see, we always have these. How about Jesus? I mean, looked like a big unifier still going on, but there was dividing. They killed at least, slaughtered each other left, right, and sideways. So you see what I'm getting at? But that now, why is it important? Why we can't wait for centuries? Anybody got a quick one on that? We don't have any time anymore. We can't wait for 200 years, 100 years, 500 years. We have to know now, because the forces of division are so powerful. And if they with given the armaments that are available, we could wipe ourselves out tomorrow morning. So unifying and dividing is now much more existential rather than, oh, let's see who shows over time. You know, Jesus after 2,000 years, Christianity, Buddha, you can name hundreds, and I want you to do that today. We'll do that. So it's becoming now really now. And that means that and this is how I came into it, I started to look into my own behaviors. Now I'm going into the psycho-personal. And I said, have I been a divider or a unifier? I'd like to think I'm a unifier. Everybody wants to be a unifier, no? Go around and ask, how many would like to be a divider? do a poll. But are we really unifiers? Not really, because our behaviors don't show that, but we don't acknowledge our behaviors because of, you know, my theme, cognitive dissonance. I refuse to believe that what I'm doing is not the right thing, even if all the facts and evidence and other people showing shows me the reverse. There's a tendency for us to hold on to our ego, okay? And that is the problem. Buddha identified that 2,500 years ago. He said, you know, if you're not really true within yourself, you're going to probably end up causing a lot of trouble or suffering samsara a lot. So this is where I'm coming from. It's really become more immediate now about this. It's not a little nice session about feeling good, feeling better. It's about really dealing with central survival issues. There's an MIT study that says, you know, there's two of them actually, that showed that we got about 10 or 15 years if we don't get things turned around. So from there, that is where I start. And there are wonderful examples, you know, from history, again, as I just referred to, there, that if you look over, we look back and we say, yeah, St. Francis of Assisi, you know, people wanted to kill him. They drove him out of Assisi. They almost got burnt at the stake. So, but in the end, he's a unifier. And even today, the Franciscans are still running around, you know. So you see these elements, that's what I'm talking about. It's a kind of dialectic. We have both of these forces within us operating all the time. That's a quickie. But it's a kind of where I'm coming from and where I'd like to take you today. So the design of today, if we can stay focused when we go into our breakout groups to look, the first thing we'll do, I'm just giving you the overview so you're prepared, that when we go into our breakout group, it's just an opportunity to say, who do I identify with? So as a unifier and a divider, who's my model? Who's been an inspiration in my life one way or another? Because you don't know. Sometimes dividers produce unity. French Revolution was a great dividing motion, but you don't know if the France still exists today, so you don't know if it was good or bad. I want you to look at that because it gives you a frame of reference outside ourselves. It makes us connect with our human ancestry, our avatars. So that's why I wanted you to see who do you associate? Who's your model? And that's what we'll do in the first breakout group. And why? What's the facts? What's the data? Is it just your opinion, or do you have some evidence to really say, oh yeah, you know, I see this, I see that. So it's a kind of validation. And once we get through that one, and we can process that a little after just to make sure we're all on the same page, then we can move it later into a second breakout group where we really do the deep dive work, the honesty work, the MKP work, the Mankind Project work, the self-examination work. What am I really? What are my behaviors really showing me? More division, more unifying, and there's no judgment here. It's really assessment. If I don't know what I'm doing, I can't do what I want. If I don't know who what my behaviors are like, it's not going to create a lot of unity. So that will be the second part, is the deeper dive is show and tell. Look into our own behaviors. And as I said, I'll start with mine as a president, because that's how I came into this. I really looked into my own behaviors. Of course I'm a unifier, right, sure. Until many people pointed out that I was really dividing a lot. And I had a look at that. So that gave me the inspiration for preparing this today. So we are already early. Maybe we'll have a lot more time than to process. If that is clear in the background and what the deeper root is, we can't afford to be, believe it, I mean, we really can't afford to be more dividers than unifiers anymore, starting right now. It's damn dangerous. That's the real. If we continue putting there's too much on the other side of division, we're dead. Climate, political, armaments, okay, anxiety, you name it. So with that, if you're ready to go, how about going into a breakout room with that first question, okay? Recognizing, we'll do this, I think there'll be 3 in each, and Tom will listen to, and just speak to that. Who's my model? Well, for what reason? These are factors or qualities that are eventually me identifying with the unifier and or the divider also. We need to have both in the same room. We can't say it's good and evil. That's that idea of life is already dangerous. When you have good and evil, you have war. When you have bad and right and wrong, you have war. There's no escape. So we've got to start with what we do in our group, empathy, the empathic acceptance of who we are and the willingness to admit it. So that's the first level of the breakout group. So we'll go from there. And
I'll also broadcast it once you're in the rooms too.
Yeah, that's good. Tom, we got great organizers here. I got a great appreciation for all of you who've organized this. Thank you. We have about 10 minutes, and we're good to get the main takeaway from your group experience said briefly, and concisely as you can do it, so that we catch the jewel in the lotus. Okay.
Well, a key word was somebody referred to the sleaziness of Donald Trump and how that is unique to our time and how disturbing that is. And others spoke about the inspiration of Albert Schweitzer, his music, politics, and Mahatma Gandhi, the lowering our eyes in the face of fear, bringing that back to our movement heritage. We made some algorithms.
Good.
Thank you, Katerina.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Bob and I looked into the similar. We found toxic dividers, but there are positive dividers that we referenced. He referenced Muhammad Ali, for example, controversial figures, Martin Luther, assassinated. I brought up Francis of Assisi because it's a way that I enter into a unifying state within myself. So I use that, and then that enables me to, at least have some focus about the unifying quality that I need to keep constant. But the dividing is there. The many behavior. So that's what I take away. Bob, do you have any other addition to that?
I just since we're going to bring up some of the stuff we talked about later, I'm gonna hold off on it. Just for me, one of the key takeaways is the paradox of being both a unifier and a divider. It's just, and discerning, for myself, what value I'm going to get from it, and that this can be scary. It could be it's personally challenging. So anyway, more to come on that. So let's go to group 2, which was Alpha, Bruce, and Stephen. When do you guys report out, please?
I'll speak for them in there. There was a common theme about going outside of ourselves to reach out to others. The idea of curiosity and seeking others and differences, to the idea of just listening multiple ideas at the same time. And so I think the common theme was just to get outside of the ego and look at what those values are in our community outside.
Thank you. Let's go to group 3, Archie, Brian, and Wayne.
What stayed with me was a phrase said towards the end of our time together, which was the us versus them habit. Dividing, separating between, I'm in the right team, I'm in the right group, and the others are bad. Coming from, I suppose, fear and needing to put a part of me needing to protect itself. And then also one of us talked about it's such an antique, deeply instinctual part of us, the need to make instant judgments for survival. In every split second, is this animal or this person going to kill me and eat me, or is it going to be okay? And just immediate discriminating, which will be going on in the reptilian brain, I imagine. But I don't know whether you, Brian, or Wayne want to add anything else.
Yeah, I'm the one who raised that point, that how do we overcome something that is so deeply ingrained in our DNA? It's about survival. The example I gave was people who might be opposing immigration on our borders, might not consider themselves racist or dividers. They're just trying to survive, and they're thinking these are enemies who are going to make it hard for me to survive. And so it's this animal nature, this mammalian nature in us to determine who we need to oppose, who we need to fight, who we need to flee from. And I don't know how to overcome that.
Thank you. Okay, last group, Art and Jerry. You're both muted. Okay, we'll let that go. Joseph, let's just move on then.
I wanted to make a point. It seemed to me that if I or anyone comes in with an idea, a vision, to begin to talk about that vision is going to create division. Because people will decide, oh, yes, I like that. This is great. No, I can't stand that. Screw that. So before there can be, if that vision catches fire, there will possibly automatically be division, and then there'll be a new unity, hopefully. And whether that works, it probably hasn't worked for some things, You know, it didn't work for Hitler in the end, ultimately, but it worked at first. I get that's what gets stirred up in me when you talk about this.
And I'll just jump in. I hope Jerry shares a little bit about what they were talking about before I got in, but we were talking a little bit about One Love, and Silk Road, the music as a unifier. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
You know, and Bob Marley talks about not you and me, but I and I.
Mm.
You know, and the being the less. You know, there's like people thinking about other people, other groups as less than us, which was also brought up before. And it's just like we're all one world, one love. Yeah. And I hope Jerry jumps in here.
I explained that I'm very involved in civic and environmental action here. I'm an environmental activist. And I also lead an organization here that is a coalition of many organizations, which are hyper-partisan and hyper-opinionated. And holding that together is not easy. And the way I do it is I keep them focused on issues rather than on personalities and political philosophies, because those are divisive. And so everybody can agree that clean air is a good thing, you know what I mean? Or clean water, or open spaces, or good schools. And so I try to steer their, I can't stop them from voicing their opinions, especially on their own, you know, spaces, their own Facebook pages. But, you know, when they want to go hyper-partisan, I just try to steer it back, not to the middle necessarily, but rather to just, what's the issue here? You know, is the issue, and, you know, we've got all this traffic going back and forth between truck traffic between Mexico and El Paso, you know, and that creates huge amounts of pollution in what are very poor neighborhoods. So it's like the city has sort of decided by default that this is a sacrifice zone, and poor kids going to school and on their playground get to soak up diesel fuel while the kids in my neighborhood can breathe clean air, or relatively clean air. So that's an issue. You can get people involved in that. They can drop their libertarian, Republican, Democrat, communist identities or whatever long enough, you know, to let's focus on the issue, you know, and how do we move the instruments of, you know, influence here, whether it's city council or the Homeland Security or whatever, to start addressing this problem and moving these trucks to the city, to the other ports of entry where they're not going through poor neighborhoods. So that's what I meant by keep them focused on issues. And so far it's being successful, at least in terms of the coalition holding together, not necessarily in terms of our results with the power structure here, but at least in terms of holding the coalition together, we're still together. So that's a good thing. And that's what I do, is focus on issues, not on personalities and politics. Because these are very controversial items.
Yeah. Thank you, Jerry. Okay, let's move on. That's all the groups.
Okay. Let's take a moment to breathe, just breathe it into our experience so we internalize it. Let's take a moment to just digest whatever comes to you that hit the zone, you know, that hit the spot, whatever, because right now we're looking for something that, I don't know. I'm going to propose that we either get into unifying or bust. So what did you take so far from what we've heard, each one of us? Just meditate and digest it and say, what can I take with me into me right now so that it doesn't remain just everybody's view? We're seeking what we call in Latin or Italian, il bene comune, the common good. So what is it that you could take away right now from just this process and from this group process. Take a minute and just breathe it in, and then we'll move on. I had my wonderful gong. Good. So with that, let's go to present the second part, because this is the deeper dive. You can see that the search for unity or unifying, which is needed in every field of life. Once a sports team can act together, they perform better. Once a military group, platoon, phalanx can get their act together, they, for better or for worse, perform better. Once a relationship is in synchronicity, it goes better. A group of musicians who play together, it sounds better. There's no question that coming into what some of my favorite theme, I think the bottom line, and the Buddha got this, but so didn't the Zen people, so didn't a lot of other, is what I call somatic equanimity, being in a state of balance, which means clarity. In other words, I am at home with myself and at oneness. And then I can deal with everything, including issues. Issues are secondary on the tree of life. Because in order to resolve issue, you have to have an ability to be listening and to be willing to participate and act together. And that's the bottom, that's the critical breaking point, isn't it? So with that, let's see, this is what our work is really all about, as I see it. If I can't come from my own equanimity, how the hell am I going to be in equanimity and agreement with anyone else? Maybe for a short time I can play on the basketball team and then go back and shoot somebody. That happens all the time. So it's not even the best example, but while they're playing, they have to be in unity with each other. Whatever the endeavor is, it works better when we are in sync. And division or disagreements can be positive. There's toxic division, as Bob brought out. There's toxic dividedness, but there's also beneficial dividedness. But you're using the state of dividedness to come into unity. The bottom line is unity. I cite my MKP brother Terry Molnar, who most of you know, has written books on the common good. He's presented at several of our meetings. So this is where I'm coming from. That's what brings us together. Otherwise, we just. So anyway, with that, that's kind of like what I'm proposing, that in the next breakout group, you look into yourself and say, what's keeping me in unity or positive dividedness, which has positive value if you use it that way? And what behaviors am I willing to show and tell that demonstrate for me, as and you guys are witnesses in the breakout room, that demonstrate for me whether I'm speaking my truth or not. And what's the feeling that comes out? Because it's the feeling state, the emotional intelligence, that makes it all work. It's like the musicians are all in tune. Just to have a light moment here, in Italian, one of the great expressions developed by the Neapolitans was stunada, which means being out of tune. So when someone says stunada, they're out of tune. But the root of that word is tune in. So with the idea that we could do some tuning in today, at least that we could take away some of this, that's what I'm after in the next breakout group. How am I now going to show and tell within myself, and what's the truth of my behaviors. Okay, so with that, if that is clear, if anybody needs clarity, I'll say that we can do it again just so we're clear when we go in. And we can process the same way for the come out version. So, is that all clear for you? What I'm asking you to do, just for the sake of the bringing the team together. As Red Auerbach said with the Boston Celtics, wasn't it? The pick and roll is an indefatigable move if you know how to execute it. Problem is executing it. So are we ready? Is there anybody, is that okay? We're ready to go into our next part of our journey? Problem is executing it. So are we ready? Is there anybody, is that okay? We're ready to go into our next part of our journey? Mind accountability, but it's not coming up yet. Right now, we're just reporting in each breakout group from this session. What did you focus on? Focus on the behavior. Focus on more on the behaviors that really reveal what you're really doing, not what you like to think you're doing, but what are you really doing? That's the tough part.
Well, I feel like I can summarize our group. We spent most of our time talking about listening. How do we listen actively? The importance of listening. We're not going to understand or love other people if we don't listen to them. How do we listen? How do we overcome our innate desire to craft our answer well instead of listening and asking questions? I mean, Bruce or Alfo, if you have something to add to that.
What we thought was important is most people, they look like they're in the group and they look like they're listening. But if you listen, but if you go into, as the discussion progresses, one can often see is that the person only heard what he wanted to hear, or and it's in their minds, and they say, well, this is the truth because I was there, I heard it, and this is what it was. But oftentimes they hadn't listened properly. So it may have a piece of what you wanted, but not all of it. There may be ramifications on both. And it's like, and yet there has to be some things which may not be, is what is it different between what Wayne believes and what I believe, which is an equally relevant piece, but that doesn't make Wayne right and me wrong. But it also means, what did Bruce say? What does it mean? What did Wayne say? What does it mean? And where might we be together? Is there any agreement? And it's not wrong to be in disagreement as long as we have actively listened and we understand what the other person said and means. My humble opinion.
Good.
Thank you.
Next man. Next man up.
I'll just share that because we were talking during the breakout time of like, where are you a disruptor? And you talked about the importance of there being a disruptor as well as a come together energy. And one example was that I was talking about, I was on a dance board, and actually the whole board agreed to raise the price of the dance because we were losing money. And I was the one holdout, and I said, no, let's lower the price of the dance because our costs are fixed and we can get more people coming and make more money than if we raise the price and we're going to lose some dancers. We're going to end up losing money. So I was the one changer, and actually everybody ended up going along with it.
Go. Speak. Okay, I'll do my show and tell. It's actually what started me to on this whole theme. I recognized my behaviors in my marriage, just to take one example, was divisive. But it was toxic divisive in part in the beginning because I used righteous anger to hide what really was going on I couldn't grasp. And that threw my kids and my ex-wife into turmoil. However, now I've used that toxic and I've transformed it into a takeaway for me is that now I realize that I was in the ass. I was a disruptor, and that was not only in the marriage, but in other circles, in my work as well sometimes. And I now am able to take the molecules of the elements of that, instead of beating my breast and saying, bad, okay, forgive yourself, mea culpa, I've forgiven myself, oh Lord. I actually taking those elements and transforming them, transforming lead into gold. And it's serving me now to come into my unity within myself. So I have to own the disowned parts and use them to come into unity. And that brings me into a much better place in myself. So that's my takeaway from watching my own behaviors.
Okay. So Alan, share with us.
Well, in our group, I think what I'm taking away from it right now, a member isn't always the greatest, is that we were change agents. We chose to be change agents, and we each shared how that went. And like Jared already shared what he was about climate change and his civic way of being and sticking with the issues, not the politics. And Archie he's good at getting people to be happy, but he doesn't always necessarily get it himself. We all shared this. Sometimes we don't have that many friends. I shared that if I can overcome my shadow of wanting to be right, then I can be really an effective change agent in our work, in our professions, our past professions. And probably being the oldest guy here at age 86 and a half, I'm not going to stand in front of a parade right now, but I'm still wanting to contribute and be useful. And yeah, and Jerry or Archie, if you got something that would make this more complete, please jump in.
I want to bring up something that kind of takes off of something you said, Alan. You said about not wanting to stand in front of the parade at 87. I'm 78. And then I've had some health issues lately. And I understand as elders, it's not our job to be warriors. It's our job to hold space, values, but it's not our job necessarily to be the doers, the warriors.
Exactly.
There are times in history when that changes. And when an elder is called out of elderhood to deal with a crisis situation. Nelson Mandela would be a good one. If you remember Charles de Gaulle, France fell apart, the Fourth Republic fell apart in the 50s, and they brought de Gaulle out of retirement, to kind of hold the country together until they get a new constitution. I'm trying to think of other examples. But in the Odyssey, Odysseus, there's this episode in the Odyssey where he goes to the underworld and he meets his dead mother. He was not aware that his mother had died, grieving for his loss. But anyway, he goes there for the specific purpose of meeting his counselor, his spiritual guide, a guy named Tiresias. And Tiresias tells him, stay on the track, you know, you will get back to Ithaca and you will succeed in recapturing your throne with much hardship. When you are old, you will be called on a last voyage. Because he was a navigator, he was a sailor. And on that voyage, what you are to do is you are to go to a country, find a land where men do not know Poseidon. Poseidon is Odysseus's patron.
Yeah.
It says, and you will know these men because they will think your oar is a winnowing fan because they don't know the sea. He says, you are to put up that oar and you are to teach them the wisdom of Poseidon. That's depth. That's what elders do. Elders are the repository of the deep. The sea is the unconscious, the shadow. And so, you know, I just love that. I love that image. I love that image of being called out on the last voyage, whether it's Mandela or de Gaulle, you know, somebody like that. We don't have too many of those wise men in the world today. But there's something about that image that would call me out of being an elder for one last voyage, you know.
Gotcha.
But I don't want to be a warrior again. That's too much work, you know.
Anyone else on this to report?
Yeah, briefly. I appreciated the time with Arthur, and we talked about, I think, maybe two different ideas, and one of them is how we have to get out of our comfort zone occasionally if we are trying to approach either one of the paths. And I personally have tried to start along that path. I'm sort of like wrestling with some relationships professionally, for example, but I also appreciate the fact that we still have our individuality, and I think that Arthur helped me understand that, you know, there's something innate within our nature that we've spent, that we've kept, that we've captured throughout our lives, and we're not necessarily going to erase that identity because of the pathway, and that's what we have.
Katerina?
The metaphor of tango, that we don't want to step on the partner's toes. And some of the rituals that I do of gathering threads of dissonance, gathering horizontal, twisting them into a rope, and then tossing some into the ocean or maybe a bowl of water on the floor, recognizing there's still the elements that are waiting to be refined, and moving as a way of processing, might be a word, for these elements that are not divisive, and then they become again part of the growing whole, that it keeps evolving.
Yes.
Thank you, Katerina. Archie, you have something?
On a personal level, the difference between my sort of public how I am in public and how I am at home with my wife. That's quite shocking to me. My behavior, my unifying publicly and nice guy, and how I treat my wife. And another thing, personally, but joy of what was it, of positively dividing. I mean, I feel I've lived under the tyranny of a sort of politically correct, got to unify for years, you know, needing to include everybody and like everybody. Stuff it. I haven't got enough years left. So I've got to decide. And it's going to be no, you guys over there, or you women over there, yes. And it is such a liberating relief.
Wow.
That.
Because we're moving into the third part, which we can do all together now. This is the important thing, because we witness. And this is where the question here is, comes to the accountability stage. Accountability is king, you know, so it's a major work in men's groups, and probably it's maturity, really. It's the ultimate maturity, responsibility continuum goes into. So I said, the checkout here is, which behaviors am I ready to own, right? And what is my takeaway? What am I going to be self-accountability for from everything, whatever I experienced today that touched me? What am I willing to be accountable for within myself, with all of us as witnesses? So the witnesses hold the container of. So that's really the last piece. It's also the takeaway and the finish up of our meeting, because it's what counts, you know. So is anyone with clarification? So then we can take each out. I'm looking at time, 2 minutes each. Looks like we might just about do it, but no more, because we'll leave out each other. So is that clear about accountability? We all are familiar with accountability. As I've presented it, as we use it in MKP, and then you can put in your own flavor, your own, you know. So, ready to go on this one? This is an open, we are in the one big great room now. So why don't we just start with whoever wishes to start? There's not an you can, you know, don't have to do this, but it's a good thing that will help all of us to be witness to. So, first man up. Anyone having what is the accountability today from everything that you?
Well, it seems. Thank you, Joseph. Accountability is about keeping our agreements.
Sure. In this case, it's within ourselves. This is
yeah. So what the deep dive is, what agreements have I made with myself?
Yes.
And there's the stretch. If, for example, I want to be more accepting of people on the far right, even if I'm judging them harshly in different ways for their actions or their words, I can make an agreement within myself to listen more, or to actively seek dialogue with. I don't know, I'm not quite prepared to make that agreement right now, but that's the point I wanted to make, is if we don't make those agreements with ourselves, it's all just kind of vague.
So what agreement are you making with yourself? That's the
well, in general, to listen better, to be less judgmental in listening.
That's good. Great.
Thank you.
Next man up. Please.
Mine is about busyness and depth. So busyness, rushing around, the image of plates spinning on a rod, yeah, keeping them all going, rushing around, rather than the depth where actually I don't need to do anything externally, and I'm simply an antenna, just emitting, transmitting, receiving, that. And I've had tastes of that, but parts of me were scared. It was too much, too strong, too powerful, and so I sort of go back to rushing around.
So
Next.
I'll share. So for me, the takeaway is, as much as I would like to make this all about macro social, and save the fucking world, I realized in this conversation that this is a very internal experience for me, in the sense that I need to start with me and my wife, those two closest to me, and look at how the divider gets in a way. And the divider in that case being my ego, myself. I need, me first kind of thing, rather than working for us, my partner and me together, as a unit. And I really love the part of finding, like Josef, you picked Saint Francis of Assisi. And I think for me right now, to look around and see, who's my actual role model in this endeavor, is going to allow me to really do a deeper dive in myself about how this is showing up in my life. And I had mentioned to you earlier, when I was first thinking about this, that fills me with a lot of trepidation, and that's a good thing, because that means that I'm about to be on a growth curve. So my stretch here is to pay attention, okay, and take a look at this cognitively, and then integrate it emotionally and physically. So thanks for hearing me. I'm in with that.
Oh. Oh, just as a brief aside, because I love to throw little notes in that kind of like this little distract. Remember we used to do in MKP, we used to do aho all the time? Well, in my town in Farnese, Italy, you don't do that. You know what we use? Ao. For 1,000 years, they've been doing ao. So it must have a root somewhere.
I don't understand. Because I say a whole because that's the word that's saying I agree with you at the end of a statement, or a kind of a proof, but that was the way the word and sound was taught to me in the context of warriors.
Okay, so next man up on accountability in your own way, because we have to have a broader view of accountability, not just strict.
My takeaway in accountability is a bell at every half hour, where it's completely quiet in me, and I don't know what I'm going to do next. It is a kind of listening to what am I to do in the next half hour.
Beautiful.
And I'll think of all of you. Yes, because it's been amazing to be here with you. Thank you.
That's a good reminder for me. I'm just appreciating that feeling of this represented. So.
Oh. And for me, I'm really realizing more and more that it's when I want to be right, that I cannot hear other people, and that's a real stretch for when I'm so lost in my own beliefs and what's going on that I can't really see where everybody else is and what they value is. And my version of it actually is I do. I feel like a lot of that comes from when I feel like I'm not enough, or I want to be important, or I want to be seen. And I really like I've been listening to Joe Dispenza, and he talks about becoming nobody. And Ram Dass actually has a book called Becoming Nobody. And I think I was just listening to a video, and it was talking about, well, we do things because it benefits ourself. The thing is, there is no self.
So what's your accountability just to keep you focused?
My accountability is when I start feeling right, and acting on that, and not listening and being part of the I rather than the you and me. It's just I and I, and going with that. So whenever I get into me, I'm in trouble. I'm in.
Oh.
Right, I might as well go. For me, my own interest has always been sort of integration of the various aspects of myself and myself with the world. And for many years, especially when I was academic, it was a conceptual affair. And then it became kind of a psychological processing thing, especially parts work, the way in which, voice dialogue works and stuff like that. And I still continue to do that and find great value in that. But what inspired me in this meeting was actually listening to Katharina and her emphasis on motion and bodily movement as being a way of integrating. And I must say, I've dropped both tango and I've dropped both qigong. And tango is probably out of my league right now, but I should probably get back to qigong. Tai chi also, but I was doing primarily qigong. And so the accountability here is to go back more to that. I'm sorry, I'm just caught some coffee here. With that, I'm in or out, whatever the case may be.
My accountability is to take care of myself physically, and I have some challenges to deal with. And my accountability also is to reflect on what I'm learning in your sharing here today, and recall what I can, and let that float through my body, because I've heard some beautiful things here today. And if I can keep that, I might write some notes afterwards. It would help me walking my path, I think. So that's my accountability.
Next man up, Beth.
Yeah. What I take from this conversation is that kind of, I will say, worry, because the world that I heard, what I listen, in some part of me, I can understand that. And it feels, like not being alone in that worry. Yeah, I will take that. I will take that as a kind of insight, as a kind of good feeling. Yeah. Thank you.
Speak. And you can do a second round if something comes to. I think the more we focus, this is just my suggestion, the more we can focus, our energies go this way rather than outward. we are in a time when our energies tend to go this way. Center, flight from the center. I call it in my language ego-fugicity, which means to flee, to run off. And the real challenge we have as Westerners, especially, this is one of the Achilles heels of democracy, just my projection, is that it does good things, but it also keeps us separate because of the emphasis on self so much. So we are a real challenge here. So I have to really, my accountability, I should say, my accountability is to really keep staying in the unifying zone within myself first. And I find automatically when I do that, I'm in tune with others around me, where if I try to do it with others first, it's like putting the cart before the horse. I like to start with the horse. And the horse for me is coming from the body, and Katerina put it beautifully, and she just represented it so well. It's coming from the body wisdom, the body, mind, emotional wisdom place. When I'm in that place, it looks like I can deal with everything a little better. So that's my accountability, is to cultivate that and stay with it as much as I can. Anyone else have any further or additional or supplementaries to?
There's a part, what you said, Katerina, about the bell every half hour and not knowing what you're going to do with the next half hour has just blown me away. And I'm just letting all the pieces just sort of come back to earth, and I am just loving it. I'm in ecstasy for that. But the fear, but I could do that. I could do that. I could, wow. So I'm just grooving on that. I'm sort of orgasmic about that at the moment. Thank you.
You see, we needed the female wisdom element here, the Kuan Yin, and she appeared. I notice there's only one woman here today, but that the Kuan Yin, the yes. So, does anyone else have any further refinement on? I would just say, let's take this in for a minute. It looks like we're coming to a close. Why don't we just digest this for a minute in silence? That's the silent mode where we enter the meditational digestion mode through the breathing. So breathe in whatever you wish of your self-discovery, your accountability, whatever. Just breathe it in. See how it feels so that it has a more solid connection. Breathing in and the breathing out cycle. Maybe a one word, if you like, before we close our meeting today, which has been for me also a reawakening, rejoining, recommuning. So that's my takeaway word, rejoining, recommuning. We don't have a takeaway word or expression.
Connection.
Closing.
Opening.
Reunion.
Blessed.
Blessing.
Blessed.
Joy and blessing to you, Joseph.
Ho'oponopono, which means I'm sorry, forgive me, I love you, I'm grateful.
For me, opportunity in the sense of opportunity. Yeah.
Promise of quiet. Quiet. Promise. Quiet.
Good. Well, may we all meet again.
So before we go, let me just take a moment and say, I want to say thank you to the team put this together, Stephen Reynolds, Art Gabhart, Tom Bizance for their work in helping make this happen. Josef, thank you for a really, really excellent and for me, a really wonderful cafe. Thank you for your presentation. But most of all, thank you to all the participants. Thank you all for coming. You guys are the reason we do this. So blessings, y'all. Have a great Saturday.